Hello, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, but maybe we can wait for 1 minute and see if more people join, and then we will start the talk. All right. Okay, maybe we can start it, okay? And I guess more people will join later. So hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Talk Memory and Language Learning. And okay, so first of all, let's see what we will be doing this morning. And as you see, we will talk about these 5 things. First of all, in the first part, we will see a little bit how memory works. And this is going to be, let's say, in a way, the most theoretical part of it, okay? And we will see the different parts, the different types of memory we have. We will see how the different types of memory work and so on. Then we will focus on a model of memory. And I say a model of memory because there are many. And memory is one of those things that have been researched for years, and possibly one of those things on which there isn't that much agreement, quite honestly. But I will, as I say, I will present you with one of the most usual models of memory. Then we will look at some factors that help remembering, okay? And then towards the end of the talk, we will go with some activities you can use in class regarding memory. And then at the end, I will give you some a little summary and some tips to remember. Okay, so let's go. And the first thing is that I was looking for some quotes for this show, you know, I mean, all of those inspiring talks, quotes, sorry. And quite honestly, I couldn't find any I liked, but instead I found this one that I quite liked. And it says this: as you get older, 3 things happen. The first is your memory goes, and I can't remember the other 2. And I must say, disclaimer, I'm at that point now, I think, when my memory is starting to go, because apparently, and one of the things I have learned researching for this is that your memory gets worse as you get older. So I'm in this situation right now, I must say. Something interesting is that the term memory was coined by the German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus. Excuse my German, I don't really know how to pronounce this one. But the interesting thing is that this was coined in not 500 years ago or 300 years ago. It was coined in 1885. Which, quite honestly, I found surprising, let's say, because, I mean, you would think that this term has been around for much longer. But it's only 1885 that they started to look at memory and start a little bit the research of memory. Right, over the talk, we will check some different statements. And I will start with the first one. In the end, our aim is to optimize our learners' memory for language to help them remember the sounds, words, chunks, structures, and textual conventions of the target language. Whether we do this through an explicit focus on form, through rich and varied exposure, or through plentiful opportunities to use the language in meaningful ways, or through a combination of all 3, the cognitive processes of memory are central to everything we do. And you will see that in this talk, I will mention the rich exposure and the opportunities to use the language in meaningful ways, because let's say that's the main thing regarding memory and how we remember things. But how does memory work? Okay, and I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist, so I will just give you a rough idea of how memory works to see how then we can apply that to the classroom. So we will see different types of memory, and the first one is the working memory. And this is an interesting thing because working memory is possibly what we used to call the short-term memory. Right, short-term memory was defined as temporarily accessible information that has a limited storage time. And let's say that this was the original definition of this, and in a way this has changed a little bit. Okay. And here we have the new one. So you can read in 1 second. Okay. So working memory is the neural structures and cognitive processes that maintain the accessibility of information for short periods of time in an active conscious state. Okay, so as you see, a little bit different from what the short-term memory used to be, let's say. And the important thing here is that the working memory is not only limited in time, because it is, okay, like the short-term memory, in the way that it was limited storage time, no, but it's not limited only in time, it's only limited by capacity, okay? So only a small amount of data, 5 to 9 pieces of information, interestingly, can be maintained and processed in working memory at any given time. This is quite interesting because this means that whenever students are learning something new vocabulary and so on, we can say that we cannot, or we shouldn't be teaching any more than 5 to 9 new pieces of information anytime. I mean, teaching vocabulary, for example, okay? So we shouldn't be teaching any more than 5 to 9 new words, for example, because again, the working memory is limited not only by time, but as I said, also by capacity. Examples of working memory, they include recalling the earlier part of a sentence, for example, to understand a later part, or holding a number in mind while doing a math problem in one's head, or remembering where an object was just seen, okay? So it's, again, what happens, let's say, for example, in the last 30 seconds, okay? This is opposed, of course, to the long-term memory, okay? Which is the memory process in the brain that takes information from the short-term memory and then creates a long-lasting memory. And these memories can be from an hour or several decades ago. And the long-term memory, the good thing is that it can hold an unlimited amount of information for an indefinite period of time, as opposed to working memory, as you said. Okay, so it's apparently the long-term memory can hold any amount of information you want, and it can be forever, really. Material can be stored in long-term memory for anything between a few days and a lifetime, depending on the richness of the links that were made with existing material in the initial encoding, and on the regularity of opportunities to retrieve and reactivate it. And this is going to be the key to using memory in class. So it's this concept of richness of links. So it depends on what you relate it to when you are learning a word. Okay, so this may be similar to this, or with an image and then the pronunciation and so on. It depends on all that richness. It depends on how long we are going to be able to remember that, and also on the regularity of opportunities to retrieve and reactivate it. Okay, so as I say, this will be the key concepts when we talk about memory. Other types of memory. The creative memory would be the creative long-term memories are information about facts, rules, events, definitions, and experiences that someone can recall when necessary, okay? And it can be broken into two different bits. And the first one being the semantic memory. The semantic memory is the general knowledge about the world. So a person may remember a fact or event that they did not experience because they learned or studied it. No, so it's all the things you learn. You don't experience them necessarily, but you learn them, and they are in your memory, and that's what we call the semantic memory. Also, we have the episodic memory. Memories or event or autobiographical facts. This is what we remember, okay? This is the memories we have of our childhood, for example, or things that happened to us and things that happened to you and you remember, okay? So you see that there are two different sources. One is your personal memories, and the other one is your semantic memory, the memory you have because you learn something, is our knowledge about the world. And another kind of memory, procedural memory. And procedural long-term memories, these are information related to activities learned through practice and repetition. For example, driving a car, okay? Or do you have your laces in your shoes, for example? That's what we call the procedural memory. And this is automatic. I mean, whenever you are riding a bike or whenever you are driving a car, you don't need to retrieve anything. You don't need to, or at least consciously, you don't need to start thinking about, okay, now I have to start the car, now first gear, now this, now, so it's completely automatic. And the interesting thing about this procedural memory and related to language is that we can link it to precisely language learning. So fluency, in a way, and this is a definition by Michael Lewis, is fluency in language is the result of having a stored bank, or phrasicon, he called it, of memorized chunks. So chunks being sentences or phrases, fixed expressions, collocations, and so on, that we can use without thinking too much about it, okay? So this allows the speaker to assemble utterances in real time without the need to generate each utterance from scratch using internalized grammar. That is to say, students can memorize chunks of language, and then without thinking very much about, okay, do I need to use the present perfect here, or do I need to use the past simple here, or why do I need to use, without thinking too much about that, they can use it as they are, and as I say, without thinking too much about it, and quite automatically putting one chunk after the other when they speak. And again, memory, of course, is essential for this. Those were the kinds of memory that you will find, let's say, in research in general. And again, I mean, possibly if you start researching that a little bit, you will see that Some authors talk about those kinds of memory. Some other authors talk about other kinds of memory, because as I say, it's something that still they are researching quite a lot, and something that has been researched quite recently, and something that is developing quite a lot. And the next thing, if you remember, was a model of memory, okay? So what do we have to do, or how does memory work in order to, for example, remember words, phrases, and language in general? And regarding memory, there are essentially three processes involved in remembering language. The first one is encoding. And what's this? Encoding is learning the language. So learning the language by perceiving it and relating it to past knowledge, okay? And this definition is very important, because it has, let's say, the two main elements of learning new language. First of all, is perceiving it or noticing it, we can call it as well. And the other one is relating it to past knowledge. And we will see that this is essential to learn a language, okay? Relating the new knowledge to past knowledge. I mean, memorizing, let's say, and putting it in the long-term memory storage, data in the long-term memory, is all about creating links between the new language and the old knowledge, let's say, okay? And like we said before, and we'll repeat it later, the stronger these links, the better, because we will be more able to remember the words, to remember the language. And then the third process involved in memorizing is retrieval. That is to say, it's just accessing the information when we need it. And we will see that this is absolutely key to the memory, let's say, okay? Accessing the information when we need it. Because sometimes in class, we learn a word, we learn language, and we don't revisit that language until much later, or we don't even revisit the language. And the point is that we are missing the, let's say, key feature of remembering language. That is to say, retrieving, accessing, using the language. So let's remember that that's an essential bit of memorizing. And like we say here, most memory researchers now acknowledge that what is already stored in long-term memory actually plays a huge part in the acquisition of new data, okay? So again, I want to emphasize this, this bit, because it is true, what we already know is what will link the new language, let's say, okay? So we need to link the new words to something we already know in order to memorize it. Research advises that as we study, we should think of the meaning of the events, and we should try to relate the new events to information we already know. Again, the same thing, okay? So link the new language to language you already know, and language that is in your long-term memory. This helps us form associations that we can use to retrieve information later. When new language data enters working memory, it immediately activates areas of existing knowledge in long-term memory and searches for links between them, okay? So this is something that we automatically do, let's say, okay? So whenever new data enters your working memory, and remember the working memory is the short-term memory, it activates areas of existing knowledge, okay? And they start to try to find links with something you already know. And I will give you a little example with this, a personal example. And last week, I learned this word. And I don't know if you know the word for toldo, okay? In the word for toldo in English. But toldo in English is owning, apparently, as I learned the other day. And okay, and a person told me, right, owning. Owning is very similar to yawning, okay? And this was automatically the link that I created to learn the word owning, which now, as you see, I remember, okay? And this is a real case. I mean, it's a word that possibly is not very common and that you don't use very much. By linking it to something you already know, like yawning, you can remember that this toldo in English, what toldo is in Spanish, in English you say owning, okay? So there you are, creating links with old memories. Right, factors that help remembering. And I must say these ideas, the ideas in this section, sorry, come from a talk by Dr. Eftimia, Kamnula, a researcher from BCBL in San Sebastian, and this was from the closing plenary talk at the LTS conference in San Sebastian last March. It was a fantastic talk, and she gave us a lot of ideas about how words are learned and how memory works and so on. And I will give you again a couple of points about what's very important to help remember words. And the first one is very interesting because the first one is sleep. And sleep is essential to remember new words, new vocabulary. In fact, in some research, apparently, this is what they found. So they tested different people and they trained different people learning new words. Some people learned the words in the morning, and then they were tested, as you see in here, and then after 12 hours, they were tested again, and then they slept and they were tested again. Another group of people, they were trained in the evening. Then they slept, so tested, then slept, tested, and after some time, after 12 more hours, they were tested again. And this is super interesting because was learned at 8 p.m. do not induce any inhibitory competition effects immediately, but do so after a 12-hour interval, including a night's sleep, and continue to induce such effects after 24 hours, okay? So after sleep, it's more fixed, let's say, than if you learn it and you don't sleep, let's say. So in contrast, word learned at 8 a.m. do not show such effects immediately or after 12 hours of wakefulness, but show the effects only after 24 hours after sleep has occurred, which is very interesting, really. I mean, it shows how sleeping is very interesting. It shows how, for example, learning the night before for an exam doesn't work very much unless you sleep, okay? So again, it's possibly for a student much more effective to study than sleep and wake up early and continue studying, okay? Because again, unless you sleep, what you memorize won't go into your long-term memory, let's say. So what can we say? Sleep helps, okay? So this is something to take into account, and this is something that we cannot underestimate it, okay? Sleep is very important. So next time you find your students like this, remember that they are not sleeping, of course. They are trying to memorize the new words, okay? So possibly we should let them sleep a little bit more in class. Well, they are not. They are sleeping, and that's it. But it helps, okay? It helps in any case. Okay, and the second thing is the active retrieval, okay? So again, recovering those words from memory actively. And one of the things we do in class very much, because we have been taught to do like that, really, is teaching the words by modeling. So we model the word, and then the learners repeat it immediately, okay? So modeling by the instructor and repetition by the learner has long been a prominent feature of L2 teaching practices in traditional classrooms, as well as in self-study with, sorry, audio recordings, okay? So let's say that this is how we traditionally have learned the words. The phonological loop, that is to say, repeating the words aloud, so to say, okay, has a critical function in supporting the learning of novel phonological forms and hence new vocabulary, okay? So repeating the word aloud will definitely help learn new words. The benefit of retrieval practice, or sometimes it's referred to as the testing effect, testing is very important, okay, has been shown in studies using a wide variety of instructional materials. Procedures that yield quick acquisition and high performance during training often produce illusions of competence and may not support durable learning and performance in the long term. That is to say, if you repeat a word and the student repeats that word immediately, we might think that they are learning the word. But it's not really like this, okay? This illusion of competence, all right? So he might be able to repeat it immediately, but because of the working memory and the phonological loop, but that doesn't mean that it goes to the long-term memory, okay? So a more effective way to encourage long-term or long-lasting learning is to incorporate desirable difficulties during training, of which retrieval practice is just one example, okay? And this experiment, this research, let's say, is a very interesting one. And it's the contrast, as we said, between the imitation, so the teacher says one word and the student repeats the word immediately, or the retrieval practice. So in the first experiment, let's say, imitation, what they did was they showed the picture, and they immediately after showing the picture, they play the L2 word, and the learner repeats aloud the word, okay? So all within those 4 seconds. In the retrieval practice, what they did was they showed the picture, they waited a little bit, okay? They waited like 3 seconds more or less, and the learner tries to produce the word. And then just after some time, they played the L2 word, okay? And apparently, according to this research, that's more effective than repeating the word immediately, okay? So whenever we teach a word, it seems that it is good to wait a little bit before we produce or we say the word, because apparently it might interfere with the encoding of the word. If the student sees the word, it's in the working memory, and immediately after they hear the word, that might interfere with encoding of the word, okay? So wait a little bit, 3-4 seconds, and then say the word so that it doesn't interfere, let's say, with the linking that happens when we are learning a word. Okay, try to remember, see how much you can remember of what we have just said. I hope it is at least a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's go with some activities. And these activities, some of them have been taken from this wonderful book, okay? Memory Activities for Language Learning by Nick Bilbrough, okay? So it's a fantastic book if you want to check it out. And as I say, I will show you some activities using different techniques of memorization. So for example, look at the following telephone number for 10 seconds and try to memorize it. Okay. So how do you try to memorize it, and how much could you remember? Okay. So remember what we said at the beginning, that the working memory can store words or new information between 5 and 9 pieces of new information. Apparently numbers, what we can remember in the working memory, immediate memory, is around 7 numbers, okay, no more than that. So it wouldn't be too easy to remember more than these, let's say, okay? But possibly one of the ways we used to memorize this is, instead of trying to memorize 9 numbers, so 6, 8, 9, 2, 5, 6, 9, 4, and 5, is chunk it and try to remember only 3 numbers: 6, 8, 9, then 2, 5, 6, and then 9, 4, 4, 5, okay? Which means that instead of 9 pieces of information, we just need to remember 3 pieces of information, and that helps. Because chunking is very important when we try to remember. For example, if I say you, can you try and memorize those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of letters? And you possibly would struggle a little bit to memorize that. But if we rearrange those letters like this, cat, bus, rat, dog, immediately, as you see in your brain starts to generate images of cats, images of a bus, images of a rat, images of a dog, and possibly things related to cats, bus, rat, dog, and immediately it starts to link those groups of letters to something you already know, and that, of course, will help you memorize much more easily than if you try to memorize the previous group of letters, let's say, okay? So importance of chunking. Another very interesting activity is this. I mean, images are super powerful, and our brain, let's say, tends to try and remember images. And this one activity, we all have a store of images in class, and is take a picture that has some detail like this one, okay, this room. And what you can do is this: you can have one student try and memorize the picture. So try to memorize as many details as they can from the picture. And another student, in the meantime, thinks about questions they are going to ask about the picture. So, for example, I don't know, how many mirrors are there in the picture, okay? Or where is the sofa? How many lamps could you see, okay? And so on. And then we pair students, and one student asks the questions without the picture, of course, and then the other student, from memory, tries to remember as many details as they can. They try to answer those questions, okay? So as you see, this is some kind of memory stretching or warming up your memory, okay? And it works really well because you can use any picture. You can use a picture from the course book, or you can just use a picture from the internet and use it to help a student memorize those words or those details. Another activity, and again, you put your students in groups, and learners have to create the longest sentence they can as a group, okay? With each person saying only one word at a time. The first person in the group says one word, the next person has to repeat the word and say another which could follow it. This is important. It's not just the typical game in which we say, okay, I went to the supermarket and I bought some oranges. And then the next one, I went to the supermarket, I bought oranges and apples. I mean, it's going beyond that a little bit, okay? So it's trying to add more detail to that. So I went to, and I bought an orange and then they say, the next one says, I bought an orange and I And then the next one says, I bought an orange and I saw, etc. Okay, so it's trying to make a sentence rather than a list of products or a list of whatever you want. Okay, so it's stretching your memory a little bit more and trying to hold the phrase in your memory to try and add something that from the linguistic point of view makes sense. Another interesting activity is reordering a story. Okay, what's this about? What is this about? You have a story, okay, but it cannot be very long. I mean, it cannot be a super long story because otherwise it doesn't work. But you break a story down into short sections, as many as students in class, and then you give each of your students in your class randomly one slip of paper from the story. Okay, so you cut the story and you give those slips of paper to your students. Then as a whole group, they have to put the story in the correct order, okay? Very important, without showing the slips of paper to anyone else. This is trying to stretch their working memory, let's say, okay? So they hear the part of the story, they look at theirs, and they say, okay, yeah, it might continue yours, okay? But I will listen to another one. So it's all the time trying to listen to that part of the story, trying to hold it in the working memory, and then trying to feed their story until the whole group is able to put the story together, okay? So again, as you see, this is a little bit about stretching your memory and trying to work out your memory a little bit. Retrieving activities, because as we said at the beginning, retrieving is possibly the most important thing we can do when we try to memorize things. And lots of authors have spoken about retrieving as being key. For example, the key process in memory is retrieving, or retrieval practice is a learning technique that is known to produce enhanced long-term memory retention when compared to several other techniques, okay? So again, retrieval practice, getting students to try and use the words, remember the words, is the single most important thing we can do in class, okay? Retrieving those words as much as we can. Because new language needs to be regularly revisited in different stimulating contexts and needs to be used in meaningful ways, okay? So unless we revisit language, they won't be able to remember it, okay? So it's not enough to, in one class, learn 10 or 9 whatever items of vocabulary. If we don't revisit that again, they will not remember it. So it's very important to revisit that language we are learning in class. Productive retrieval is important. Students are provided with the meaning or a situation which calls for the word and are expected to retrieve the form, okay? Something as easy as showing a picture, for example, okay? Or something as easy as giving them the translation, okay? So, because again, it's about providing the meaning, and then they need to retrieve the form, okay? So, and as I say, this can be done in different ways, but it is important that from time to time, they try and repeat the words. The evidence suggests that productive retrieval is the most useful form for stretching the links for retaining language items in long-term memory, okay? So again, get them to retrieve those words all the time. Students are more likely, and this is very interesting, to remember something if there is an element of a struggle. So again, an added difficulty, as we saw before, okay, involved in the process of retrieval, if it is a bit difficult, okay? So possibly rather than the image, maybe the translation and so on, okay? So make it difficult so that they struggle a little, because that strengthens the links in your memory, and it makes it easier to remember it later. Most researchers agree that little and often is the key to this, okay? I don't know if you use Bamboozle, but Bamboozle is absolutely ideal for this, okay? Bamboozle is that game in which you have different squares on the screen with numbers and so on, and then you touch one, it turns, and you get whatever it is, okay? And it can be, again, an image, it can be a definition, it can be whatever it is. And this is great, for example, to use at the beginning of the class, okay? So you start by taking the 10 words you learned the day before, you have them there, and you give them the definition, translation, whatever you want, and they have to retrieve that, okay? And don't do it once. Repeat it as many times as you need it over the time, okay? Not in the same class, but possibly 1 week later, and then 2 weeks later, and so on. First of all, students accept bamboozle very well because they love it, and they don't realize that what you are doing is control practice to help them remember, okay? And it's super useful, as I say, okay? So starting your lessons with a little bit of bamboozle might be incredibly useful. An idea might be, for example, taking one gap filling activity you have. So take any sentence level gap fill or sentence transformation type essays, like from the first certificate or advanced or PET or whatever it is, from the course book that the learners have done. Make it into a bamboozle, okay? So they touch it and suddenly they get the sentence with a gap and they have to complete the gap, okay? And again, they need to remember what they have in their memory in order to be able to do this. Memorizing language. There are some factors that facilitate remembering language. And I mean, possibly instinctively, you know what they are, okay? And repetition is one of the keys, of course. As I said before, and I've repeated myself quite often in this talk now, you really need to repeat things in order to be able to remember, okay? So it's not enough to see it once unless we see it again and then try to memorize it. So repetition of the vocabulary is a very important thing. Personalization, students will be more able to remember something if they can relate to that personally, okay? So if they are learning owning and they have one at home, they might just try to remember that and remember what they have at home and try to link it to something they have in their brains and so on, okay? So if they are able to relate to that personally, they will be much better able to remember the words. Motivation, if they want to learn the word, they will learn it much more easily, okay? So that's why they remember all the swear words, okay? So, I mean, you try to teach, I don't know how many words, they don't remember any, but the swear word, that one is the one they remember all the time, okay? So because they are motivated and they want to learn it, and therefore their brain automatically creates much stronger links with that word. Chunking, as we said, okay, so chunking the language is very important, and as we said, with the numbers or the groups of letters and so on, okay. So chunking is very important, and it helps you remember. So also learning whole phrases, let's say, and then putting one phrase after the other. Associations, as we said before, the more links you create with a new word, the better they will remember it, okay? So associations like owning, yawning, or learning a new word and relating it to the translation and an image and possibly a definition and so on, okay? So the more associations we create, the stronger the links will be. Contextualization, okay? So if we present the language in context, obviously, this is going to be much better and much easier to remember, always in context, of course. Affective factors, okay? So again, if it affects them, okay, affectively, I mean, it's going to be much easier to remember, okay? So, so try to link it to their feelings in a way. Physicality as well. Physicality, of course, is one of the factors. So, I mean, possibly making the movement with your body, okay? So, possibly if you are learning owning and you are linking it to yawning, possibly as well going, okay, so yawning yourself and trying to remember it will help quite a lot. And finally, decision making. If they need to decide something with that word, it will create stronger links. Memorizing words. Okay, so I don't know if you speak any Latin, but I've taken some Latin words, and here you have the translations. Okay, try to remember them. Try to, for example, oshitare, which is yawn, vermis, which is worm, scientia is knowledge, spolia ruin, pluvia rain, and pulcra is beautiful. Okay, you see that your brain is already creating links. Okay, pluvia, if you speak Spanish, for example, you are linking it to lluvia directly, and spolia, if you possibly your brain is linking it to spoil, ruin, and so on, and pulcra, possibly again, if you speak Spanish, your brain is automatically linking it and creating the link with pulcro, for example. Okay, so your brain automatically, again, remember that, is trying to create already the links to help you memorize this. Okay, and we will leave the words there. Okay, so, and I don't know if you can remember any of the words. Yawn, I don't know if you remember how to say it. Worm, knowledge, ruin, rain, beautiful, maybe you remember. We will revisit it later. One very useful activity is skeleton stories. I don't know if you like Halloween stories. I love them. And this is one of them. It's very short, and I hope you don't find it too scary. I was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. After that, I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my own screams. Okay, so a fantastic Halloween story. And what we do is we give the story, or we read the story to the students. We show the story to the students. We comment on it. We talk about the story and so on. And what we do later is we give them this. This is the first letter of the words you have in the story. And what they have to do, obviously, is with the help of those first letters, try to reconstruct the story together. Okay, I don't know if you remember the story with these words. I mean, possibly I was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. After that, I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my own screams. Okay, so like that, with those cues, students will try to remember the story they have. Repeating and reactivating, as we said before. One of the things with the material we use in class is that we don't revisit it very often. I mean, texts learners are exposed to in course books are encountered only once, but by asking learners to go back to these texts with different tasks, we can promote deeper processing of the language they contain through re-examination and noticing. Remember, the first point in encoding language is noticing it. Okay, and task repetition leads to automatization of the language areas being used. For example, one activity we can do to revisit text is this, the retranslated texts activity. So what do? We tell students to go to a short text in the course book, ask them to rewrite the text in Spanish or in Basque if they want, and we collect them. Okay, so again, it cannot be a long text. It has to be like 4 or 5 sentences long, more or less. And in the next class, we give each learner or group their own L1 version of the text, and we ask them to rewrite their version into English. Okay, we ask them to compare their version to the English text in English with the original English version and which part did they translate accurately, okay? So he's trying to remember, oh, how do you say this in English? How do you say that in English, okay? And then noticing it with the original text. And this is a very useful thing. Now, possibly you are familiar with dictogloss. The difference here is that instead of trying to reconstruct the text immediately, that is to say, trying to use your working memory, what you do is you try to reconstruct the text later using your long-term memory, okay? So it's slightly different to dictogloss. For example, we can have a text like this. We've all heard this one, haven't we? And Dr. Turner agreed. I think it's probably good advice, unless you are vegetarian or vegan, of course. A bowl of chicken soup is comforting, so it may well have a positive psychological effect. This from Optimize V1 Plus. You give them this little text, they translate it together into a Spanish or Basque, and you collect it. The following day, you give it back, and they translate it back into English, and then they compare. Okay, so it's a way of, as I say, using long-term memory rather than working memory. I don't know if you can remember the words. Maybe your memory is trying to find those links, right? And see which ones you can remember. For example, Ion, Citare, Worm, Vermis, Knowledge Scientia, Ruin Spolia, Rain Pluvia, Beautiful Pulchra, and that's it. Okay, memory techniques to start finishing the talk. A very powerful memory technique is what's called the mind palace or the locking method. Some of you might recognize that picture. That's Sherlock, and very famously Sherlock in the wonderful, by the way, TV series. He every time he needed something, he visited his mind palace. Okay. And he tried to find that information in his mind palace, and he would go like this, and oh yes, it's here, and so on. This is a real technique, and it's a very useful one. Okay, how does it work? So imagine a complex place such as a palace, for example, where you could physically store memories or information. So you imagine that, okay? So a place with your rooms and so on. And what you do is you imagine that. And for example, you take the word and you put it in one room or in a drawer or whatever it is. Each room is specific to the memory or piece of information that you want to remember, okay? So you store what you want to remember inside the room, okay? And it can be, as I say, vocabulary or whatever you want, but it's imagining that. Because the mind is so gifted at remembering visual memories, that's the point. I mean, the mind is much more able, so to say, to remember visual memories, okay, rather than other things. And it can help to make the memory or piece of information as detailed or unique as possible, okay? So, and the only thing you have to do is then you need to retrieve, again, remember that, okay, is key, retrieve a memory or piece of information. You simply walk back through the building in your imagination, seeing and remembering each memory. This is an extremely powerful method to try and remember things. It's try it because it's amazing, really amazing. And how can you use it in class? Well, you can have, for example, 5 words, 6 words on the board, 5 words you want them to learn, and you can get them to put those 5 words in their mind palace, okay? So store it in one room, and then this one in another room, possibly with a picture of what they are learning, okay? If they are learning carrot, maybe with a picture of a carrot, and so on. And then later, they can go back to their mind palace and try to recover that, okay? Strengthen, again, the links in the long-term memory. Learning by heart, I mean, it has been possibly discredited, and it's not very popular in class. We sometimes say, oh, you are learning a list of vocabulary. That's not very useful, right? It is very useful. Memorizing things, just memorizing things is very useful. Many researchers suggest that we are much less original when using language than we previously thought. rely instead to a large extent on the store of chunks, fixed expressions, and other formulaic language items that have already been added to our mental lexicon. So we use that to speak, okay? When I'm speaking now, I'm not trying to remember words. I mean, I'm using the words that I already store in my brain to say all these things, okay? Memorizing texts that are rich in such patterns makes sense, okay? Because again, they can recover them and use them again. We won't do this, okay? Sorry, because we haven't got time, obviously, but it would be a matter of rewriting that text you saw before, and again, comparing it to what you had in the original, okay? All right, a little bit of a summary, okay? We should think of the meaning of the events, and we should try to relate it to new events, the new events to information we already know, okay? Again, this is key, relating to what, relating the new words to something you already know, owning to yawning, for example. Sleeping helps, remember that, that's like that. Sleeping helps, people need to sleep in order to be able to remember things. The phonological loop, saying the words, has a critical function in supporting the learning of new vocabulary, okay? So again, get the students to repeat the words because that will help them remember, okay? It's not just they see the word, they use it in control practice. No, they have to say it in order to be able to remember it. The benefit of retrieval practice, the testing effect, okay, has been shown in studies using a wide variety of instructional materials. Remember, retrieve the words, use the words, because that's how they will remember them. Encourage long-lasting learning by incorporating desirable difficulties, okay, make it a bit difficult, and they will remember it better, okay? So, for example, by retrieving with bamboozle, for example. New language needs to be regularly revisited in different stimulating contexts and ultimately needs to be used in meaningful ways, okay? So again, revisiting the new language is key. They have to do that. And the evidence suggests that productive retrieval is the most useful form for strengthening the links for retaining language items in long-term memory, okay? So remember this, retrieve, use the language, and that will create stronger links. Retrieving is more effective than imitating, remember that, the 4 seconds, okay? So rather than getting them to repeat the word immediately, which gives you, again, the illusion of competence, okay? Wait for those 4 seconds before saying the word, and that will create a much stronger link. Train students' memory in class, okay? With these memory stretching activities, with the picture activity, and so on, and because you will help them remember and learn language much better. Some bibliography, okay, I have used in this talk. And the next webinar, Synthetic Phonics for Primary Learners, okay, by Karen McGee, is on the 26th of May, 10 a.m., sorry, in the morning, not in the afternoon or evening, in the morning, by Karen McGee, okay? And thanks for listening. I hope you could learn at least 1 or 2 useful things about memory and how to use it in class, okay? So thank you very much for attending the webinar. And here we have, thank you very much, as I was saying, and I hope to see you around. I don't know if you have any questions before we finish. Nana, I don't know if you have any questions. Okay, so as I say, if there aren't any questions, then this is it. Thanks for attending, as I said, and I hope to see you soon again. Okay, see you, everyone.